Welcome to Neurohabits. This is part 2 of the presentation on dyslexia and Alexia. In part 2, we are going to talk about what is Alexia, why it's important to study Alexia, 3 broad types of symptoms. Then we're going to understand the difference between central and peripheral Alexia, and then what we can deduce about reading. Alexia is an inability to read due to brain damage. This is due to an accident or a stroke or some kind of tumor in the brain that affects a very specific part of the brain. Why is it important to study Alexia? Well, reading is an important part of everyday life. It's important for work. We need to read things all the time at work. It's important for school. It's an important form of entertainment, such as reading books, magazines, Facebook, text messages, and it's an important part of our social life, such as reading street signs. Studying Alexia gives us insight into how reading occurs in the brain, and then we can also apply this knowledge to dyslexia. There are 3 broad types of symptoms. One, you have total Alexia, which is a total inability to read. Then you have verbal Alexia and literal Alexia. In both of them, the person still retains some kind of ability to read. In total Alexia, it looks like the damage occurs at the junction of the temporal lobe right here, and the parietal lobe right here. So the junction right here of the left hemisphere. Verbal Alexia is the inability to read single words, such as brain, for example. Cannot read the full word, but they can read the single letters. So one by one, patients are still able to read the single letters one by one. They think that the damage here is at the same level as in total Alexia, but it's just a smaller area. And then we have literal Alexia. This is the contrary to this. This is the inability to read the single letters. Cannot read single letters, but reading full words is retained. Next, it is important to know the difference between central Alexia and peripheral Alexia. How does reading work? Well, first there is the word that goes through the eye. The information goes to the occipital cortex, and then somehow to the meaning of the word. In central Alexia, there seems to be a problem of connection, a problem of access right here to the meaning of the word. In peripheral Alexia, however, there seems to be a problem with the visual processing of the word, something along these lines. There are 3 main types of peripheral dyslexia: Alexia without dysgraphia, neglect dyslexia, and attentional dyslexia. In Alexia without dysgraphia, the patient has difficulty reading, but is able to write pretty well. Neglect dyslexia is thought to be a problem of attention, and it only occurs in hemi-neglect patients. These patients don't pay attention to anything that's on the left side of the body or in the left side of the visual field. When it comes to reading, what happens is that when they see a word, they only pay attention to the right side of the word. So here, for example, they might completely ignore this part and only read this. Now, attentional dyslexia. This is a little confusing because we just said that neglect dyslexia is a problem of attention, and now we have attentional dyslexia. But these two are actually quite different. In attentional dyslexia, we have the symptoms of letters are shifting. And we think that this is due to a problem of focusing vision. So what happens is, in a word, these people will have difficulty reading the individual letters inside the word because to them it feels like the letters keep on changing places. There are three main types of central dyslexia: deep dyslexia, phonological dyslexia, and surface dyslexia. Deep dyslexia is the most studied type of dyslexia. People with this reading disorder will make a lot of different types of errors, such as morphological errors or semantic errors. Semantic errors are a little interesting because if someone has to read the word night, for example, so night, they might end up reading castle instead. Here you see that these two words, night and castles, are related by category. Phonological dyslexia. Phonological dyslexia is thought to be a problem of print to sound correspondence. So it's thought to be a problem between the written form of the word and the way it sounds. So the problem would be somewhere right here. People with this disability will be able to read real words such as table. Table wouldn't be a problem, but they will have a much greater difficulty reading nonsense words such as, I don't know, like teagle, for example. It's a word that does not exist. And people with this reading disability will also find it easier to read concrete words and harder to read abstract words. Now, surface dyslexia. Surface dyslexia is thought to be a difficulty because people are reading without a lexical access. These people have a hard time reading words that are irregular, that sound irregular. For example, there are two words like yacht and island. These two words sound very different from their written form, and maybe someone with this disability might end up reading yacht and Island or Iceland. Patients with Alzheimer's disease or semantic dementia, which is an atrophy of the left temporal hemisphere, tend to have this kind of dyslexia, surface dyslexia. What can we deduce about how reading occurs in the brain? Well, there are a lot of reading models, but none of them really account for the full spectrum of disorders or disabilities that we see in people. What we do know, however, is that reading is much more complex, much more difficult than we could intuitively imagine it to be. Reading is not just seeing individual letters, putting them into one word, and then sounding that word. There are many different brain areas that are very specific, that have a very specific function, that are all involved in making reading possible. Thank you for watching Neurohabits. Please visit www.neurohabits.com and subscribe to my email list for access to all of my videos and more.